The Philippines, officially the Republic of the Philippines, is an archipelagic country in Southeast Asia. Located in the western Pacific Ocean, it consists of 7,641 islands, with a total area of roughly 300,000 square kilometers, which are broadly categorized in three main geographical divisions from north to south: Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. With a population of over 110 million, is the world's 12th most populous country. The Philippines is bounded by the South China Sea to the west, the Philippine Sea to the east, and the Celebes Sea to the south. It shares maritime borders with Taiwan to the north, Japan to the northeast, Palau to the east and southeast, Indonesia to the south, Malaysia to the southwest, Vietnam to the west, and China to the northwest. It has diverse ethnicities and a rich culture. Manila is the country's capital, and its most populated city is Quezon City. Both are within Metro Manila. Negritos, the archipelago's earliest inhabitants, were followed by waves of Austronesian peoples. The adoption of animism, Hinduism with Buddhist influence, and Islam established island kingdoms. Extensive overseas trade with neighbors such as the late Tang or Song Empire brought Chinese people to the archipelago as well, which would also gradually settle in and intermix over the centuries. The arrival of the explorer Ferdinand Magellan marked the beginning of Spanish colonization. In 1543, Spanish explorer Ruy López de Villalobos named the archipelago Las Islas Filipinas in honor of King Philip II of Castile. Catholicism became the dominant religion, and Manila became the western hub of trans-Pacific trade. Hispanic immigrants from Latin America and Iberia would also selectively colonize. The Philippine Revolution began in 1896 and became entwined with the 1898 Spanish-American War. Spain ceded the territory to the United States, and Filipino revolutionaries declared the First Philippine Republic. The ensuing Philippine-American War ended with the United States controlling the territory until the Japanese invasion of the islands during World War II. After the United States retook the Philippines from the Japanese, the Philippines became independent in 1946. Since then, the country notably experienced a period of martial law from 1972 to 1981 under the dictatorship of Ferdinand Marcos and his subsequent overthrow by the People Power Revolution in 1986. Since returning to democracy, the Constitution of the Fifth Republic was enacted in 1987, and the country has been governed as a unitary presidential republic. However, the country continues to struggle with issues such as inequality and endemic corruption. The Philippines is an emerging market and a developing and newly industrialized country whose economy is transitioning from being agricultural to service and manufacturing center. Its location as an island country on the Pacific Ring of Fire and close to the equator makes it prone to earthquakes and typhoons. The Philippines has a variety of natural resources and a globally significant level of biodiversity. The country is part of multiple international organizations and forums. Main article: Names of the Philippines. During his 1542 expedition, Spanish explorer Ruy López de Villalobos named the islands of Leyte and Samar Filipinas after the Prince of Asturias, later Philip II of Castile. Eventually, the name Las Islas Filipinas would be used for the archipelago's Spanish possessions. 19. 6 other names, such as Islas del Poniente Western Islands, Islas del Oriente Eastern Islands, Ferdinand Magellan's name, and San Elzaro Islands of Stede Lazarus, were used by the Spanish to refer to islands in the region before Spanish rule was established. 2021-22 During the Philippine Revolution, the Malolos Congress proclaimed it the República Filipina, the Philippine Republic. 23 American colonial authorities referred to the country as the Philippine Islands, a translation of the Spanish name. 24. The United States began changing its nomenclature from the Philippine Islands to the Philippines in the Philippine Autonomy Act and the Jones Law. 25. The official title, Republic of the Philippines, was included in the 1935 Constitution as the name of the future independent state. 26, and in all succeeding constitutional revisions. 27-28. Main article, History of the Philippines for a chronological guide. See Timeline of Philippine History. Prehistory pre-900 Main article, Prehistory of the Philippines. A burial jar with its lid decorated with two people on a both Manungal burial jar. One of the numerous burial jars found on the cave system. There is evidence of early hominins living in what is now the Philippines as early as 709,000 years ago. 29 bones from Calao Cave potentially represent an otherwise unknown species, Homo luzonensis, who lived 50,000 to 67,000 years ago. 30-31. The oldest modern human remains on the islands are from the Taban Caves of Palawan. Youth dated to 47,011 to 10,000 years ago. 32. Taban man is presumably a Negrito. Among the archipelago's earliest inhabitants descended from the first human migrations out of Africa via the coastal route along southern Asia to the now sunken landmasses of Sundaland and Sahel. 33. The first Austronesians reached the Philippines from Taiwan around 2200 BC, settling the Baton's Islands where they built stone fortresses known as Ajangs. 34. Jade artifacts have been dated to 2000 BC. 35-36, with Lingaling Ode jade items made in Luzon with raw materials from Taiwan. 37. By 1000 BC, the inhabitants of the archipelago had developed into four societies: hunter-gatherer tribes, warrior societies, highland plutocracies, and port principalities. 38. Early states. 9001565 Main article, History of the Philippines. 9001565. A couple portrayed in 1590's early Spanish colonial period of the Philippines, draped in gold. The earliest known surviving written record in the Philippines is the 900 AD Laguna copperplate inscription, which was written in Old Malay using the early Kawi script. 39. By the 14th century, several large coastal settlements emerged as trading centers and became the focus of societal changes. 40. Some polities had exchanges with other states throughout Asia. 41. 342. Trade with China began during the late Tang dynasty. 43-44, and expanded during the Song dynasty. 45, 46, 44. Throughout the second millennium AD, some polities were part of the tributary system of China. 19, 177, 178, 41. 3. With extensive trade and diplomacy, this brought southern Chinese merchants and migrants from southern Fujian. 47, 48, 49, who would gradually settle and intermix in the Philippines. Indian cultural traits, such as linguistic terms and religious practices, began to spread in the Philippines during the 14th century, via the Indianized Hindu Majapahit Empire. 50-51. By the 15th century, Islam was established in the Sulu archipelago, and spread from there. 40. Polities founded in the Philippines between the 10th and 16th centuries include Manila. 52. Tondo, Namayan, Pangasinan, Cabaloan, Cebu, Butuan, Maguindanao, Lanao, Sulu, and Mai. 53. The early polities typically had a three-tier social structure: nobility, freemen, and dependent debtor bondsmen. 41. 354, 672. Among the nobility were leaders known as datus, who were responsible for ruling autonomous groups barangays or dilohan. 55. When the barangays banded together to form a larger settlement or a geographically looser alliance. 41. 356. Their more esteemed members would be recognized as a paramount datu. 57. 58. 38. Raja or Sultan. 58. And would rule the community. 59. Population density is thought to have been low during the 14th to 16th centuries. 57. 18. Due to the frequency of typhoons and the Philippines' location on the Pacific Ring of Fire. 60. Portuguese explorer Ferdinand Magellan arrived in 1521, claimed the islands for Spain, and was killed by Lapalapu's men in the Battle of Mactan. 61, 2162, 261. Spanish and American colonial rule, 1565-1934. Main articles: History of the Philippines, 1565-1898, and History of the Philippines, 1898-1946. See caption. Manila, 1847. Unification and colonization by the Crown of Castile began when Spanish explorer Miguel López de Legazpi arrived from New Spain in 1565. 6360 for 65. 2023. Many Filipinos were brought to New Spain as slaves and forced crew. 66. Whereas many Latin Americans were brought to the Philippines as soldiers and colonists. 67. The Philippines hosts the only Latin American established districts in Asia. 68-69. Spanish Manila became the capital of the Captaincy General of the Philippines and the Spanish East Indies in 1571. 70-71. Spanish territories in Asia and the Pacific. 72. The Spanish invaded local states using the principle of divide and conquer. 62. 374. Bringing most of what is the present-day Philippines under one unified administration. 73-74. Disparate barangays were deliberately consolidated into towns, where Catholic missionaries could more easily convert their inhabitants to Christianity. 75-53. 68-76, which was initially syncretist. 77. Christianization by the Spanish friars occurred mostly across the settled lowlands over the course of time. From 1565 to 1821, the Philippines was governed as a territory of the Mexico City-based Viceroyalty of New Spain. It was then administered from Madrid after the Mexican War of Independence. 78-81. Manila became the western hub of trans-Pacific trade. 79. By Manila galleons built in Baikal and Cavite. 80-81. During its rule, Spain nearly bankrupted its treasury, quelling indigenous revolts. 78-11-1122. And defending against external military attacks. 82-1077. 83. Including Moro piracy. 84. A 17th century war against the Dutch. 18th century British occupation of Manila, and conflict with Muslims in the south. 85. 4. Undue weight. Discuss administration of the Philippines was considered a drain on the economy of New Spain. 82-1077, and abandoning it or trading it for other territory was debated. This course of action was opposed because of the island's economic potential, security, and the desire to continue religious conversion in the region. 57-78-86. The colony survived on an annual subsidy from the Spanish Crown. 82-1077, averaging 250,000 pesos. 57-8, usually paid as 75 tons of silver bullion from the Americas. 87. British forces occupied Manila from 1762 to 1764 during the 7 Years' War, and Spanish rule was restored with the 1763 Treaty of Paris. 65. 81-83. The Spanish considered their war with the Muslims in Southeast Asia an extension of the Reconquista. 88-89. The Spanish-Moro conflict lasted for several hundred years. Spain conquered portions of Mindanao and Jolo during the last quarter of the 19th century. 90. And the Muslim Moro in the Sultanate of Sulu acknowledged Spanish sovereignty. 91-92. Photo of a large group of men on steps. Some are seated, and others are standing. Several are wearing top hats. Ilustrados in Madrid around 1890. Philippine ports opened to world trade during the 19th century, and Filipino society began to change. 93-94. Social identity changed, with the term Filipino encompassing all residents of the archipelago instead of solely referring to Spaniards born in the Philippines. 95-96. Revolutionary sentiment grew in 1872 after 200 locally recruited colonial troops and laborers, alongside 3 activist Catholic priests, were executed on questionable grounds. 97-98. This inspired the propaganda movement, organized by Marcelo H. del Pilar, Jose Rizal, Graciano López Gina, and Mariano Ponce, which advocated political reform in the Philippines. 99 Rizal was executed on December 30, 1896, for rebellion, and his death radicalized many who had been loyal to Spain. 100 Attempts at reform met with resistance. Andres Bonifacio founded the Katipunan Secret Society, which sought independence from Spain through armed revolt. In 1892, 78, 137, the Katipunan Cry of Pugad Lawan began the Philippine Revolution. In 1896, 101 internal disputes led to the Tejeros Convention, at which Bonifacio lost his position, and Emilio Aguinaldo was elected the new leader of the revolution. 102, 147, the 1897 Pact of Biak na Bato result. The Spanish-American War began the following year, and reached the Philippines. Aguinaldo returned, resumed the revolution, and declared independence from Spain on June 12, 1898. 103, 26. In December 1898, the islands were ceded by Spain to the United States with Puerto Rico and Guam after the Spanish-American War. 104-105. Spain ruled the Philippines for 333 years. 106. The First Philippine Republic was promulgated on January 21, 1899. 107. Lack of recognition by the United States led to an outbreak of hostilities that, after refusal by the U.S. on-scene military commander of a ceasefire proposal and a declaration of war by the nascent republic, escalated into the Philippine-American War. 108-109-110-111 Filipino General Gregorio del Pilar and his troops in Pampanga around 1898, during the Philippine-American War resulted in the deaths of 250,000 to 1 million civilians, primarily due to famine and disease. 112. Many Filipinos were transported by the Americans to concentration camps, where thousands died. 113114. After the fall of the First Philippine Republic in 1902, an American civilian government was established with the Philippine Organic Act. 115. American forces continued to secure and extend their control of the islands, suppressing an attempted extension of the Philippine Republic. 102. 200-202-112. Securing the Sultanate of Sulu. 116-117. Establishing control of interior mountainous areas which had resisted Spanish conquest. 118. And encouraging large-scale resettlement of Christians in once predominantly Muslim Mindanao. 119120. Commonwealth and World War II. 1935-1946. Cultural developments in the Philippines strengthened a national identity. 121-122. 12 and Tagalog began to take precedence over other local languages. 75. 121 Governmental functions were gradually given to Filipinos by the Taft Commission. 82. 1081. 1117. The 1934 Tidings-McDuffie Act granted a 10-year transition to independence through the creation of the Commonwealth of the Philippines the following year. 123. With Manuel Quezon president and Sergio Osmia vice president. 124. Quezon's priorities were defense, social justice, inequality, economic diversification, and national character. 82. 1081. 1117 Filipino, a standardized variety of Tagalog, became the national language. 125. 2729 Women's suffrage was introduced. 12662. 416, and land reform was considered. 127, 128, 129. The introduction of women's suffrage during the Commonwealth period, 1935-1946, signifies a progressive step towards gender equality in the Philippines. This gave women the right to vote and participate in the country's political processes. General Douglas MacArthur and Sergio Osmia left coming ashore during the Battle of Leyte on October 20, 1944, the Empire of Japan invaded the Philippines in December 1941 during World War I. 130, and the Second Philippine Republic was established as a puppet state governed by Jose P. Laurel. 131-132. Beginning in 1942, The Japanese occupation of the Philippines was opposed by large-scale underground guerrilla activity, 133-134-135. Atrocities and war crimes were committed during the war, including the Bataan Death March and the Manila Massacre, 136-137. The Philippine resistance and Allied troops defeated the Japanese in 1944 and 1945. Over 1 million Filipinos were estimated to have died by the end of the war. 138-139. On October 11, 1945, the Philippines became a founding member of the United Nations. 140-141, 38-41. On July 4, 1946, during the presidency of Manuel Roxas, the country's independence was recognized by the United States with the Treaty of Manila. 141. 38-41-142. Douglas MacArthur, Sergio Osmia, and Osmia's staff waiting Independence 1946 present. Main articles: History of the Philippines 1946-1965, History of the Philippines 1965-1986, and History of the Philippines 1986 present. The raising of the flag of the Philippines during the Declaration of Philippine Independence on July 4. 1946 efforts at post-war reconstruction and ending the Hukbalahap rebellion succeeded during Ramon Magsaysay's presidency. 143, but sporadic communist insurgency continued to flare up long afterward. 144. Under Magsaysay's successor, Carlos P. Garcia, the government initiated a Filipino-first policy which promoted Filipino-owned businesses. 75. 182, succeeding Garcia, Diosdado Macapagal moved Independence Day from July 4 to June 12, the date of Emilio Aguinaldo's Declaration. 145, and pursued a claim on eastern North Borneo. 146-147. In 1965, Macapagal lost the presidential election to Ferdinand Marcos. Early in his presidency, Marcos began infrastructure projects funded mostly by foreign loans. This improved the economy and contributed to his re-election in 1969, 148, 58, 149. Near the end of his last constitutionally permitted term, Marcos declared martial law on September 21, 197-150, using the specter of communism 151-152-153, and began to rule by decree. The period was characterized by political repression, censorship, and human rights violations. 155-156. Monopolies controlled by Marcos's cronies were established in key industries. 157-158-159, including logging. 160, and broadcasting. 62. 120. A sugar monopoly led to a famine on the island of Negros. 161. With his wife, Imelda, Marcos was accused of corruption and embezzling billions of dollars of public funds. 162-163. Marcos's heavy borrowing early in his presidency resulted in economic crashes, exacerbated by an early 1980s recession where the economy contracted by 7.3% annually in 1984, and 1985-164, 212-165. Growing public frustration with post-EDSA governance led to the 2016 election. 191 of populist Rodrigo Duterte, 192-193, whose presidency saw the decline of liberalism in the country, albeit largely retaining liberal economic policies. 194-195. Among Duterte's priorities was aggressively increasing infrastructure spending to spur economic growth. 196-197, the enactment of the Bangsamoro Organic Law. 198, an intensified crackdown on crime and communist insurgencies. 199, and an anti-drug campaign that reduced drug proliferation. 200, but that has also led to extrajudicial killings. 201-202. In early 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic reached the Philippines. 203-204, necessitating nationwide lockdowns that caused a brief but severe economic recession. 205-206, under a promise of continuing Duterte's policies. 195. Marcos's son, Bongbong Marcos, ran with Duterte's daughter, Sara, and won the 2022 election. 207 Marcos's renewal of a pro-US foreign policy, however, has been viewed as a reversal of Duterte's cordiality with China, and territorial disputes in the South China Sea have since escalated. 208. Geographiman articles, Geography of the Philippines and List of Islands of the Philippines. Map of the Philippines, color-coded by elevation. Philippines is generally mountainous. Uplands make up 65% of the country's total land area. 54. 38-209. The Philippines is an archipelago of about 7,641 islands. 210-211 covering a total area including inland bodies of water of about 300,000 square kilometers. 115. 831. 212-213. 1510 stretching 1,850 kilometers. 150 mi north to south. 215 from the South China Sea to the Celebes Sea. 216. The Philippines is bordered by the Philippine Sea to the east. 217-218 and the Sulu Sea to the southwest. 219. The country's 11 largest islands are Luzon, Mindanao, Samar, Negros, Palawan, Panay, Mindoro, Leyte, Cebu, Bohol and Masbate, about 95% of its total land area. 220. The Philippines coastline measures 36,289 kilometers. 22.549 mi, the world's fifth longest. 221, and the country's exclusive economic zone covers 2,263,816 square kilometers. 874.06 for mi. 222. Its highest mountain is Mount Apo on Mindanao, with an altitude of 2,954 meters. 9.692 ft above sea level. 10. The Philippines' longest river is the Cagayan River in northern Luzon, which flows for about 520 kilometers. 320 mi. 223. Manila Bay, on which is the capital city of Manila. 224 is connected to Laguna de Bay. 225. The country's largest lake by the Pasig River. 226. On the western fringes of the Pacific Ring of Fire, the Philippines has frequent seismic and volcanic activity. 227. For the region is seismically active, and has been constructed by plates converging towards each other from multiple directions. 228-229. About 5 earthquakes are recorded daily, although most are too weak to be felt. 230. The Philippines has 23 active volcanoes. Of them, Mayon, Taal, Canlan, and Bulusan have the largest number of recorded eruptions. 232-213. 26. The country has valuable 233 mineral deposits as a result of its complex geologic structure and high level of seismic activity. 234-235. It is thought to have the world's second largest gold deposits after South Africa, large copper deposits. 236. And the world's largest deposits of palladium. 237. The country's gold production in 2015 is 21 metric tons. 238. Other minerals include chromium, nickel, molybdenum, platinum, and zinc. 239. However, poor management and law enforcement, opposition from indigenous communities, and past environmental damage have left these resources largely untapped. 236-240. Biodiversity. Man article, Wildlife of the Philippines. Also list of threatened species of the Philippinesider buffalo with large, curved horns, seen from Abavith. Carabao is the national animal of the Philippines. It symbolizes strength, power, efficiency, perseverance, and hard work. 241. The Philippines is a megadiverse country. 242-243. With some of the world's highest rates of discovery and endemism. 67%. 244-245. With an estimated 13,500 plant species in the country. 3,500 of which are endemic. 246. Philippine rainforests have an array of flora. 247-224. About 3,500 species of trees. 249. 8,000 flowering plant species. 1,100 ferns, and 998 orchid species. 250 have been identified. 251. The Philippines has 167 terrestrial mammals, 102 endemic species, 235 reptiles, 160 endemic species, 99 amphibians, 74 endemic species, 686 birds, 224 endemic species, 252, and over 20,000 insect species. 251 as an important part of the Coral Triangle ecoregion, 253 to 54. Philippine waters have unique, diverse marine life, 255, and the world's greatest diversity of shore fish species, 256. The country has over 3,200 fish species, 121 endemic, 257. Philippine waters sustain the cultivation of fish, crustaceans, oysters, and seaweeds. 258 to 598 major types of forests are distributed throughout the Philippines: dipterocarp, beech forest, 260 pine forest, Mojave forest, lower montane forest, upper montane or mossy forest, mangroves, and ultra-basic forest, 261. According to official estimates, the Philippines had 7 million hectares 27,000 sq mi of forest cover in 2023, 262. Logging had been systemized during the American colonial period, 263, and deforestation continued after independence, accelerating during the Marcos presidency due to unregulated logging concessions. 264 to 65. Forest cover declined from 70% of the Philippines' total land area in 1900 to about 18.3% in 1999. 266. Rehabilitation efforts have had marginal success. 267. The Philippines is a priority hotspot for biodiversity conservation. 268. 242. It has more than 200 protected areas. 269. Which was expanded to 7,790,000 hectares 30,100 sq mi as of 2023. 2703 sites in the Philippines have been included on the UNESCO World Heritage List: the Tubataha Reef in the Sulu Sea, 271 the Puerto Princesa Subterranean River, 272, and the Mount Hamaguitan Wildlife Sanctuary, 273 Climateman article, Climate of the Philippines. Thunderstorms bringing rain over the Philippines is common from June to November. The Philippines has a tropical maritime climate which is usually hot and humid. There are 3 seasons: a hot, dry season from March to May, a rainy season from June to November, and a cool, dry season from December to February. 274. The southwest monsoon, known as the Habagat, lasts from May to October, and the northeast monsoon Amihan lasts from November to April. 275. 24-25. The coolest month is January, and the warmest is May. Temperatures at sea level across the Philippines tend to be in the same range. Regardless of latitude, average annual temperature is around 26.6 C 79, 9F, but is 18.3 C 64, 9F in Baguio, 1,500 meters 4,900 F above sea level. 276. The country's average humidity is 82%. 275. 24-25. Annual rainfall is as high as 5,000 millimeters 200 in on the mountainous east coast, but less than 1,000 millimeters 39 in some sheltered valleys. 274. The Philippine area of responsibility has 19 typhoons in a typical year. 277. Usually from July to October. 2748 or 9 of them make landfall. 278-279, the wettest recorded typhoon to hit the Philippines, dropped 2,210 millimeters 87 in Baguio from July 14 to 18, 1911 to 80. The country is among the world's 10 most vulnerable to climate change. 281-282 Government and Politicsman articles. Politics of the Philippines and Government of the Philippines. Also, Political History of the Philippines. Large white and red building on a river Malacanang Palace is the president's official residence. The Philippines has a democratic government, a constitutional republic with the presidential system. 283. The president is head of state and head of government. 284. And is the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. 283. The president is elected through direct election by the citizens of the Philippines for a 6-year term. 285. The president appoints and presides over the cabinet and officials of various national government agencies and institutions. 286. 213-214. The bicameral Congress is composed of the Senate, the upper house, with members elected to a 6-year term, and the House of Representatives, the lower house, with members elected to a 3-year term. 287. Senators are elected at large. 287. And representatives are elected from legislative districts and party lists. 286. 162-163. Judicial authority is vested in the Supreme Court, composed of a Chief Justice and 14 Associate Justices. 288. Who are appointed by the President from nominations submitted by the Judicial and Bar Council. 283. Attempts to change the government to a federal, unicameral, or parliamentary government have been made since the Ramos administration. 289. Philippine politics tends to be dominated by well-known families, such as political dynasties or celebrities. 290-91, and party switching is widely practiced. 292. Corruption is significant. 293-294-295, attributed by some historians to the Spanish colonial period's Padrino system. 296-297. The Roman Catholic Church exerts considerable, but waning 298 influence in political affairs, although a constitutional provision for the separation of church and state exists. 299. Foreign Relations. Main article. Foreign Relations of the Philippine-Escalar Coded World Map. Philippine diplomatic missions worldwide. A founding and active member of the United Nations. 141. 3738. The Philippines has been a non-permanent member of the Security Council. 300. The country participates in peacekeeping missions, particularly in East Timor. 301-302. The Philippines is a founding and active member of ASEAN Association of Southeast Asian Nations. 303-304, and a member of the East Asia Summit. 305. The Group of 24. 306, and the Non-Aligned Movement. 307. The country has sought to obtain observer status in the Organization of Islamic Cooperation since 2003, 308-309, and was a member of CEDAW. 310-311. Over 10 million Filipinos live and work in 200 countries. 312-313. Giving the Philippines soft power. 164-207. During the 1990s, the Philippines began to seek economic liberalization and free trade. 314-78. To help spur foreign direct investment. 315. It is a member of the World Trade Organization. 314-8. And the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation. 316. The Philippines entered into the ASEAN Trade in Goods Agreement in 2010-317, and the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership Free Trade Agreement (FTA) in 2023, 318-319. Through ASEAN, the Philippines has signed FTAs with China, India, Japan, South Korea, Australia, and New Zealand. 314-15. The country has bilateral FTAs with Japan, South Korea. 320, and 4 European states, Iceland, Liechtenstein, Norway, and Switzerland. 314-910. 15. The Philippines has a long relationship with the United States, involving economics, security, and interpersonal relations. 321. The Philippines' location serves an important role in the United States island chain strategy in the West Pacific. 322-323. A mutual defense treaty between the two countries was signed in 1951, and was supplemented with the 1999 Visiting Forces Agreement and the 2016 Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement. 324. The country supported American policies during the Cold War, and participated in the Korean and Vietnam Wars. 325-326. In 2003, the Philippines was designated a major non-NATO ally. 327. Under President Duterte, ties with the United States weakened in favor of improved relations with China and Russia. 328-329-330. The Philippines relies heavily on the United States for its external defense. 187. 11. The U.S. has made regular assurances to defend the Philippines. 331. Including the South China Sea. 332. Since 1975, the Philippines has valued its relations with China. 333. Is top trading partner. 334. And cooperates significantly with the country. 335. 328. Japan is the biggest bilateral contributor of official development assistance to the Philippines. 336. 337. Although some tension exists because of World War II, animosity has faded. 85. 93. Historical and cultural ties continue to affect relations with Spain. 338. 339. Relations with Middle Eastern countries are shaped by the high number of Filipinos working in those countries. 340. And by issues related to the Muslim minority in the Philippines. 341. Concerns have been raised about domestic abuse and war affecting the approximately 2.5 million overseas Filipino workers in the region. 342. 343. The Philippines has claims in the Spratly Islands which overlap with claims by China, Malaysia, Taiwan, and Vietnam. 344. The largest of its controlled islands is Thedo Island, which contains the Philippines' smallest town. 345. The 2012 Scarborough Shoal standoff, after China seized the shoal from the Philippines, led to an international arbitration case. 346, which the Philippines eventually won. 347. China rejected the result. 348, and made the shoal a prominent symbol of the broader dispute. 349. China has rejected new Philippine maritime laws aimed at strengthening sovereignty in the South China Sea, stating they infringe on Chinese territorial claims, and vowing to defend its interests in contested areas. 350. Militaryman article. Armed Forces of the Philippines shipwreck Jose Rizal 150 is the lead ship of her class of Philippine Navy guided missile frigates. The Volunteer Armed Forces of the Philippines AFP consist of three branches: the Philippine Air Force, the Philippine Army, and the Philippine Navy. 351-352. Civilian security is handled by the Philippine National Police under the Department of the Interior and Local Government. 353. The AFP had a total manpower of around 280,000 as of 2022, of which 130,000 were active military personnel, 100,000 were reserves, and 50,000 were paramilitaries. 354. In 2023, $477 million, 4% of GDP, was spent on the Philippine military. 355. Most of the country's defense spending is on the Philippine Army, which leads operations against internal threats such as communist and Muslim separatist insurgencies. Its preoccupation with internal security contributed to the decline of Philippine naval capability, which began during the 1970s. 357. A military modernization program began in 1995-358 and expanded in 2012 to build a more capable defense system. 359. The Philippines has long struggled against local insurgencies, separatism, and terrorism. 36036. Bangsamoro's largest separatist organizations, the Moro National Liberation Front and the Moro Islamic Liberation Front, signed final peace agreements with the government in 1996 and 2014 respectively. 363-364. Other more militant groups such as Abu Sayyaf and Bangsamoro Islamic Freedom Fighters 365 have kidnapped foreigners for ransom, particularly in the Sulu Archipelago 366-367 and Maguindanao 365, but their presence has been reduced. 368-369. The Communist Party of the Philippines CPP and its military wing, the New People's Army NPA, have been waging guerrilla warfare against the government since the 1970s and have engaged in ambushes, bombings, and assassinations of government officials and security forces. 370. Although shrinking militarily and politically after the return of democracy in 1986, 361-371, The CPNPA, through the National Democratic Front of the Philippines, continues to gather public support in urban areas by setting up communist fronts, infiltrating sectoral organizations, and rallying public discontent and increased militancy against the government. 372 The Philippines ranked 104th out of 163 countries in the 2024 Global Peace Index. 373 Administrative Divisions Main article, Administrative Divisions of the Philippines. Color-coded political map of the Philippines. The Philippines, regions and provinces. The Philippines is divided into 18 regions, 82 provinces, 149 cities, 1,493 municipalities, and 42,011 barangays. 374 regions other than Bangsamoro are divided for administrative convenience. 375. Calabarzon was the region with the greatest population as of 2020, and the National Capital Region NCR was the most densely populated. 376. The Philippines is a unitary state, with the exception of the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao Barm. 377. Although there have been steps towards decentralization. 378-379. A 1991 law devolved some powers to local governments. 380. Economiman article, Economy of the Philippines. The Philippine economy is the world's 34th largest, with an estimated 2025 nominal gross domestic product of $507.7 billion. 381. As a newly industrialized country. 382-383, the Philippine economy has been transitioning from an agricultural base to one with more emphasis on services and manufacturing. 382-384. The country's labor force was around 50 million as of 2023, and its unemployment rate was 3.1%. 385. Gross international reserves totaled $103.406 billion as of January 2024. 386. Debt to GDP ratio decreased to 60.2% at the end of 2023, from a 17-year high 63.7% at the end of the third quarter of that year, and indicated resiliency during the COVID-19 pandemic. The country's unit of currency is the Philippine peso. 388, or PAH and 389. 390. The Philippines is a net importer. 314. 55-56, 61-65, 77, 83, 391, and a debtor nation. 392. As of 2020, the country's main export markets were China, the United States, Japan, Hong Kong, and Singapore. 393. Primary exports included integrated circuits, office machinery and parts, electrical transformers, insulated wiring, and semiconductors. 393. Its primary import markets that year were China, Japan, South Korea, the United States, and Indonesia. 393. Major export crops include coconuts, bananas, and pineapples. It is the world's largest producer of abaca. 213, 226242, and was the world's second biggest exporter of nickel ore in 2022. 394, as well as the biggest exporter of gold-clad metals, and the biggest importer of copra in 2020. 3932. People planting rice plants in water. Philippines planting rice. Agriculture employed 24% of the Filipino workforce as of 2022. 395, with an average annual growth rate of 6 to 7% since around 2010. The Philippines has emerged as one of the world's fastest growing economies. 396. Driven primarily by its increasing reliance on the service sector. 397. Regional development is uneven, however, with Manila in particular gaining most of the new economic growth. 398-399. Remittances from overseas. Filipinos contribute significantly to the country's economy. 400-397. They reached a record $37.2 billion in 2023, accounting for 8.5% of GDP. 401. The Philippines is the world's primary business process outsourcing BOS center. 40-403. About 1.3 million Filipinos work in the BOS sector, primarily in customer service. 40 for science and technologyman articles. Science and Technology in the Philippines and Philippine Space Programmer, landscaped office building headquartered of the International Rice Research Institute in Los Baos, Laguna, Philippines has one of the largest agricultural research systems in Asia, despite relatively low spending on agricultural research and development. 405-406. The country has developed new varieties of crops, including rice, 407-408 coconuts, 409, and bananas. 410. Research organizations include the Philippine Rice Research Institute 411 and the International Rice Research Institute 412. The Philippine Space Agency maintains the country's space program 413-414, and the country bought its first satellite in 1996. 415D Awata 1, its first microsatellite, was launched on the United States Cygnus spacecraft in 2016. 416. The Philippines has a high concentration of cellular phone users. 417. And a high level of mobile commerce. 418. Text messaging is a popular form of communication, and the nation sent an average of 1 billion SMS messages per day in 2007. 419. The Philippine telecommunications industry had been dominated by the Plete Globe Telecom duopoly for more than 2 decades. 420. And the 2021 entry of Dito Telecommunity improved the country's telecommunications service. 421. Torres main article. Tourism in the Philippines. Papil on an observation deck overlooking hillstourists at Chocolate Hills, conical karst hills in Bohol. The Philippines is a popular retirement destination for foreigners because of its climate and low cost of living. 422. The country's main tourist attractions are its numerous beaches. 61. 109. 423. The Philippines is also a top destination for diving enthusiasts. 424-425. Tourist spots include Boracay, called the best island in the world by Travel Plus Leisure in 2012. 426. Coron and El Nido in Palawan, Cebu, Siargao, and Bohol. 427. Tourism contributed 5.2% to the Philippine GDP in 2021, lower than 12.7% in 2019, before the COVID-19 pandemic. 428. And provided 5.7 million jobs in 2019. 429. The Philippines attracted 5.45 million international visitors in 2023, 30% lower than the 8.26 million record in pre-pandemic 2019. Most tourists came from South Korea 26.4%, United States 16.5%, Japan 5.6%, Australia 4.89%, and China 4.84%. 430. Transportation. 20 white buses side by side, one larger than the other traditional left and modern jeepneys in Quezon City. Public utility vehicles older than 15 years are gradually being phased out in favor of eco-friendly Euro 4 compliant vehicles. 431. Transportation in the Philippines is by road, air, rail, and water. Roads are the dominant form of transport, carrying 98% of people and 58% of cargo. 432. In December 2018, there were 210,528 kilometers, 130,816 mi of roads in the country. 433. The backbone of land-based transportation in the country is the Pan-Philippine Highway, which connects the islands of Luzon, Samar, Leyte, and Mindanao. 434. Inter-island transport is by the 919-kilometer 571 mi strong Republic Nautical Highway, an integrated set of highways and ferry routes linking 17 cities. 435. 436. Jeepneys are a popular, iconic public utility vehicle. 213. 496. 497. Other public land transport includes buses, UV Express, 10VS, Philcab, taxis, and tricycles. 437. 438. Traffic is a significant issue in Manila and on arterial roads to the capital. 439. 440. Despite wider historical use, 441. Rail transportation in the Philippines is limited. 213. for 9-1 to transporting passengers within Metro Manila and the provinces of Laguna 442 and Quezon, for 4-3, with a short track in the Baikal region, 213-491. The country had a railway footprint of only 79 kilometers 49 mi as of 2019, which it planned to expand to 244 kilometers 15 mi. For 4-4, a revival of freight rail is planned to reduce road congestion. 445-446, the Philippines had 90 national government-owned airports as of 2022, of which 8 are international. 447, Ninoy Aquino International Airport, formerly known as Manila International Airport, has the greatest number of passengers. 447, the 2017 air domestic market was dominated by Philippine Airlines, the country's flag carrier and Asia's oldest commercial airline. 448-449, and Cebu Pacific, the country's leading low-cost carrier. 450-451, a variety of boats are used throughout the Philippines. 452, most are double outrigger vessels, known as Banca 453 or Banca. 454, modern ships use plywood instead of logs, and motor engines instead of sails. 453, they are used for fishing and inter-island travel. 454, the Philippines has over 1,800 seaports. 455 of these, the principal seaports of Manila, the country's chief and busiest port. 456, Batangas, Subic Bay, Cebu, Iloilo, Davao, Cagayan de Oro, General Santos, and Zamboanga are part of the ASEAN Transport Network. 457-458, Energy main article, Energy in the Philippines. A large dam, seen from Abavith Ambaclao Dam on the Agno River in Bukid, Benguet, Philippines, had a total installed power capacity of 26,882 megawatts in 2021. 43% was generated from coal, 14% from oil, 14% hydropower, 12% from natural gas, and 7% from geothermal sources. For 59, it is the world's third biggest geothermal energy producer, behind the United States and Indonesia. For 60, the country's largest dam is the 2-kilometer-long 75 mi San Roque Dam on the Agno River in Pangasinan. For 61, the Malampaya gas field, discovered in the early 1990s off the coast of Palawan, reduced the Philippines' reliance on imported oil. It provides about 40% of Luzon's energy requirements and 30% of the country's energy needs. 213-347. 462, the Philippines has 3 electrical grids, one each for Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. For 63, the National Grid Corporation of the Philippines manages the country's power grid since 2009-464 and provides overhead transmission lines across the country's islands. Electric distribution to consumers is provided by privately owned distribution utilities and government-owned electric cooperatives. For 63, as of N2021, the Philippines' household electrification level was about 95-41. For 65, plans to harness nuclear energy began during the early 1970s during the presidency of Ferdinand Marcos in response to the 1973 oil crisis. For 66, the Philippines completed Southeast Asia's first nuclear power plant in Bataan in 1984. For 67, political issues following Marcos' ouster and safety concerns after the 1986 Chernobyl disaster prevented the plant from being commissioned. 468-466, and plans to operate it remain controversial. 467-469. Water supply and sanitation main article, Water supply and sanitation in the Philippines. Blue Buildinga Water District Office in Banati, Iloilo. Supply and sanitation outside Metro Manila is provided by the government through local water districts in cities or towns. 470-471-472. Metro Manila is served by Manila Water and Maynilad Water Services. Except for shallow wells for domestic use, groundwater users are required to obtain a permit from the National Water Resources Board. For 71, in 2022, the total water withdrawals increased to 91 billion cubic meters. 3, 21012 CUF from 89 billion cubic meters 3.11012 CUF in 2021, and the total expenditures on water were amounted to 144.81 billion. 473 Most sewage in the Philippines flows into septic tanks. 471. In 2015, the Joint Monitoring Program for Water Supply and Sanitation noted that 74% of the Philippine population had access to improved sanitation, and good progress had been made between 1990 and 2015. For 96% of Filipino households had an improved source of drinking water, and 92% of households had sanitary toilet facilities as of 2016. Connections of toilet facilities to appropriate sewerage systems remain largely insufficient, however, especially in rural and urban poor communities. 475. 46. Main article, Demographics of the Philippines. Also, list of cities in the Philippines of May 1, 2020. The Philippines had a population of 109,035,343. 12. More than 60% of the country's population live in the coastal zone. 476, and in 2020, 54% lived in urban areas. 477. Manila, its capital, and Quezon City, the country's most populous city, are in Metro Manila. About 13.48 million people, 12% of the Philippines' population, live in Metro Manila. 477. The country's most populous metropolitan area. 478, and the world's fifth most populous. 479. Between 1948 and 2010, the population of the Philippines increased almost fivefold, from 19 million to 92 million. 480. The country's median age is 25.3, and 63.9% of its population is between 15 and 64 years old. 481. The Philippines' average annual population growth rate is decreasing. 482. Although government attempts to further reduce population growth have been contentious. 483. The country reduced its poverty rate from 49.2% in 1985-484 to 18.1% in 2021. 485, and its income inequality began to decline in 2012. 484. Ethnicity. Main article, Ethnic groups in the Philippines, also Filipinos, Pinoy, and genetic and anthropology studies on Filipino Sanather color-coded map dominant ethnic groups by province. The country has substantial ethnic diversity due to foreign influence and the archipelago's division by water and topography. 284. According to the 2020 census, the Philippines' largest ethnic groups were Tagalog 26.0%, Visayans excluding the Cebuano, Hiligaynon, and Waray 14.3%, Ilocano and Cebuano both 8%, Hiligaynon 7.9%, Bicol 6.5%, and Waray 3.8%. 6. The country's indigenous peoples consisted of 110 ethno-linguistic groups, 486, with a combined population of 15.56 million. In 2020, 6. They include the Igorot, Lumad, Mangian, and the indigenous peoples of Palawan. 487. Negritos are thought to be among the island's earliest inhabitants. 85.35. These minority Aboriginal settlers are an Australoid group, a remnant of the first human migration from Africa to Australia, who were probably displaced by later waves of migration. 488. Some Philippine Negritos have a Denisovan admixture in their genome. 489. For 90, ethnic Filipinos generally belong to several Southeast Asian ethnic groups, classified linguistically as Austronesians speaking Malayo-Polynesian languages. 491. The Austronesian population's origin is uncertain, but relatives of Taiwanese Aborigines probably brought their language and mixed with the region's existing population. 492-493. The Lumad and Sama Bajau ethnic groups have an ancestral affinity with the Austroasiatic and Malabri-speaking Tin peoples of mainland Southeast Asia. Westward expansion from Papua New Guinea to eastern Indonesia and Mindanao has been detected in the Blond people and the Sanjir language. 49 for immigrants arrived in the Philippines from elsewhere in the Spanish Empire, especially from the Spanish Americas. 495496, chopped. 6. 497, 2016 National Geographic Project concluded that people living in the Philippine archipelago carried genetic markers in the following percentages: 53% Southeast Asia and Oceania, 36% Eastern Asia, 5% Southern Europe, 3% Southern Asia, and 2% Native American from Latin America. 496, chopped. 6498 descendants of mixed-race couples are known as mestizos or Taisoy. 499, which during the Spanish colonial times were mostly composed of Chinese mestizos, mestizos de sangre, Spanish mestizos, mestizos de español, and the mix thereof Tornator S. 500501502. The modern Chinese Filipinos are well integrated into Filipino society. 28453. Primarily the descendants of immigrants from Fujian. 504, the pure ethnic Chinese Filipinos during the American colonial era. Early 1900s purportedly numbered about 1.35 million, while an estimated 22.8 million, around 20% of Filipinos, have half or partial Chinese ancestry from pre-colonial, colonial, and 20th century Chinese migrants. 505506. During the Hispanic era late 1700s, the tribute census showed mixed Spanish Filipinos made up a moderate ratio, around 5% of all citizens. 507, 539, 508, 31, 54, 113. Meanwhile, a smaller proportion, 33% of the population were Mexican Filipinos. 497, 100. Almost 300,000 American citizens live in the country as of 2023. 509, and up to 250,000 Amerasians are scattered across the cities of Angeles, Manila, and Olongapo. 510511. Other significant non-indigenous minorities include Indians 512 and Arabs. 513. Japanese Filipinos include escaped Christians Kirishitan who fled persecutions by Shogun Tokugawa Ieyasu. 514. Languagesman article. Languages of the Philippines. Ethanol lists 186 languages for the Philippines, 182 of which are living languages, the other four no longer have any known speakers. Most native languages are part of the Philippine branch of the Malayo-Polynesian languages, which is a branch of the Austronesian language family. 491. Spanish-based Creole varieties, collectively known as Chavacano, are also spoken. 515. Many Philippine Negrito languages have unique vocabularies which survived Austronesian acculturation. 516. Filipino and English are the country's official languages. 5. Filipino, a standardized version of Tagalog, is spoken primarily in Metro Manila. 517. Filipino and English are used in government, education, print, broadcast media, and business, often with the third local language. 518. Code switching between English and other local languages, notably Tagalog, is common. 519. The Philippine Constitution provides for Spanish and Arabic on a voluntary, optional basis. 5. Spanish, a widely used lingua franca during the late 19th century, has declined greatly in use. 520521. Although Spanish loanwords are still present in Philippine languages. 5225-35-4. Arabic is primarily taught in Mindanao Islamic schools. 5-5. The top languages generally spoken at home as of 2020 are Tagalog, Binisaya, Hiligaynon, Ilocano, Cebuano, and Bicol. 526. 19 regional languages are auxiliary official languages as media of instruction. 4. Clan and Bikalsavake Amagwandanamezayanan indigenous languages, including Kayanan, Fugo, Bayat, Kalinga, Kameo, Kankaname, Aspateo, Rumblomanan, Manobo, and several Visayan languages, are used in their respective provinces. 491. Filipino Sign Language is the national sign language and the language of deaf education. 5-7. Religion. Main article. Religion in the Philippines. Large crowd outside a colorfully decorated church. Catholics attend Mass at Basilica del Santo Niño during the annual Sinulog Festival in Cebu. Although the Philippines is a secular state with freedom of religion, an overwhelming majority of Filipinos consider religion very important. 5-8 and irreligion is very low. 5-9-5-3-0-5-3-1. Christianity is the dominant religion. 5-3-5-3-3, followed by about 89% of the population. 5-3-4. The country had the world's third largest Roman Catholic population as of 2013, and was Asia's largest Christian nation. 5-3-5. Census data from 2020 found that 78.8% of the population professed Roman Catholicism. The other Christian denominations include Iglesia ni Cristo, the Philippine Independent Church, and Seventh-day Adventism. 5-3-6. Protestants made up about 5% to 7% of the population in 2010. 5-3-7. 5-3-8. The Philippines sends many Christian missionaries around the world, and is a training center for foreign priests and nuns. 5-3-9. 5-4-0. Islam is the country's second largest religion, with 6.4% of the population in the 2020 census. 5-3-6. Most Muslims live in Mindanao and nearby islands. 5-3-3. And most adhere to the Shafi school of Sunni Islam. 5-4-1. About 0.2% of the population follow indigenous religions. 5-3-6. Whose practices and folk beliefs are often syncretized with Christianity and Islam. 2-7. 29-35-4-2. Buddhism is practiced by about 0.04% of the population. 5-3-6. Primarily by Filipinos of Chinese descent. 5-4-3. Education. Main article: Education in the Philippines. Further information: Higher education in the Philippines. Front of a very old building founded in 1611. The University of Santo Tomas is Asia's oldest extant university. 5-5-6. Primary and secondary schooling in the Philippines consists of 6 years of elementary period, 4 years of junior high school, and 2 years of senior high school. 5-5-7. Public education, provided by the government, is free at the elementary and secondary levels, and at most public higher education institutions. 5-5-8. 5-5-9. Science high schools for talented students were established in 1963. 5-6 out. The government provides technical vocational training and development through the Technical Education and Skills Development Authority. 5-6-1. In 2004, the government began offering alternative education to out-of-school children, youth, and adults to improve literacy. 5-6 to 5-6-3. Madaris were mainstreamed in 16 regions that year, primarily in Mindanao Muslim areas under the Department of Education. 5-6 for Catholic schools, which number more than 1. 5-0. 5-6-5, and higher education institutions are an integral part of the educational system. 5-6-6. The Philippines has 1,975 higher education institutions as of 2019, of which 246 are public and 1,729 are private. 5-6-7. Public universities are non-sectarian and are primarily classified as state-administered or local government-funded. 5-6-8. 5-6-9. The National University is the eighth-school university of the Philippines subsystem. 5-7-0. The country's top-ranked universities are the University of the Philippines Diliman, Ateneo de Manila University, De La Salle University, and University of Santo Tomas. 5-7-1. 5-7 to 5-7-3. In 2019, the Philippines had a basic literacy rate of 93.8% of those 5 years old or older. 5-7-4. And a functional literacy rate of 91.6% of those aged 10 to 64. 5-7-5. Education, a significant proportion of the national budget, was allocated 909 billion from the 5.268 trillion 2023 budget. 5-4-6. As of 2023, the country has 1,640 public libraries affiliated with the National Library of the Philippines. Main article: Culture of the Philippines. A terraced hillside Seen from Abavith Banawi rice terraces, carved by ancestors of the Ifugao people. Philippines has significant cultural diversity, reinforced by the country's fragmented geography. 41. 61577 Spanish and American cultures profoundly influenced Filipino culture as a result of long colonization. 578284 The cultures of Mindanao and the Sulu archipelago developed distinctly, since they had limited Spanish influence and more influence from nearby Islamic regions. 54. 503 Indigenous groups, such as the Igorots, have preserved their pre-colonial customs and traditions by resisting the Spanish. 5. A national identity emerged during the 19th century, however, with shared national symbols and cultural and historical touchstones. 577 Hispanic legacies include the dominance of Catholicism. 62. 5578, and the prevalence of Spanish names and surnames, which resulted from an 1849 edict ordering the systematic distribution of family names and the implementation of Spanish naming customs. 213. 7561. 237 The names of many locations also have Spanish origins. 581. American influence on modern Filipino culture. 284 is evident in the use of English. 582. 12 and Filipino consumption of fast food and American films and music. 578 Public holidays in the Philippines are classified as regular or special. 583 Festivals are primarily religious, and most towns and villages have such a festival, usually to honor a patron saint. 584-585 Better known festivals include Ati, Adahan, 586 Dinagiang, 587 Moriones, 588 Sinulog, 589, and Flores de Mayo, a month-long devotion to the Virgin Mary held in May. 590. The country's Christmas season begins as early as September 1, 591, 149, and Holy Week is a solemn religious observance for its Christian population. 59 to 591, 149. Values. Further information. Filipino values and Filipino psychological. Outdoor statue of a child pressing their forehead on the hand of a seated elder. Statue in Iriga, commemorating Mano Po. Filipino values are rooted primarily in personal alliances based in kinship, obligation, friendship, religion, particularly Christianity, and commerce. 85. 41 They center around social harmony through pakikisama. 593. 74 Motivated primarily by the desire for acceptance by a group. 59459. 5582. 47 Reciprocity through utang na lubid. Debt of gratitude is a significant Filipino cultural trait, and an internalized debt can never be fully repaid. 593. 76596. The main sanction for divergence from these values are the concepts of hiya, shame, 597, and loss of amor proprio, self-esteem. 595 The family is central to Philippine society. Norms such as loyalty, maintaining close relationships, and care for elderly parents are ingrained in Philippine society. 598-599 Respect for authority and the elderly is valued and is shown with gestures such as mano and the honorifics po and opo and kuya, older brother or 8 older sister. 600-601. Other Filipino values are optimism about the future, pessimism about the present, concern about other people, friendship and friendliness, hospitality, religiosity, respect for oneself and others, particularly women, and integrity. 602. Art and architecture. Riemann articles. Arts in the Philippines and architecture of the Philippines. Painting of dying gladiatorsuan Lunas Spoliarium 1884 at the National Museum of the Philippines. Philip art combines indigenous folk art, East Asian, and classical traditions. 603-604-605. During the Spanish colonial period, art was used to spread Catholicism, mainly through paintings and sculptures. The first recorded sculptor in the Philippines is Juan de los Santos 1590-1660, known for making retablos, 606. In 1821, Damian Domingo, the father of Filipino paintings, opened the Academia de Dibujo Art School in Binondo, 606-607. Other artists during Spanish colonial rule included painters such as Joseph Luciano Danz, Jose Honorato Lozano, Mariano Asuncion 608, and sculptors such as Isabelo Tampinco and Crispilo Hoxon, 606. Artists whose works drew attention to the Philippines are Juan Luna and Felix Resurrechi and Hidalgo, 609. Fernando Amorsolo dominated Philippine paintings during the American colonial period, popular for his pastoral scenes of Philippine countryside. 610-611 Victorio Edades, known as the father of modern Philippine art, popularized modernism in the Philippines in 1920s, and 1930s, 612 Old, mossy church with a lawn in front. The early 18th century earthquake broke Paoy Church in Ilocos Norte, a national cultural treasure and a UNESCO World Heritage Site as one of 4 Baroque churches of the Philippines. 613 Traditional Philippine architecture has 2 main models, the indigenous Bahay Cubo and the Bahay Nabato, which developed under Spanish rule. 213, 438444. Some regions, such as Batans, differ slightly due to climate. Limestone was used as a building material, and houses were built to withstand typhoons. 614-615 Spanish architecture left an imprint in town designs around a central square or plaza mayor, but many of its buildings were damaged or destroyed during World War I. 616-52. Several Philippine churches adapted Baroque architecture to withstand earthquakes, leading to the development of earthquake Baroque. 617-618 4 Baroque churches have been listed as a collective UNESCO World Heritage Site. 613 Spanish colonial fortifications. Fuerzas in several parts of the Philippines were primarily designed by missionary architects and built by Filipino stonemasons. 619 Vigan, in Ilocos Sur, is known for its Hispanic-style houses and buildings. 620 American rule introduced new architectural styles in the construction of government buildings and Art Deco theaters. 621 During the American period, construction of Gabaldon school buildings began. 622 and some city planning using architectural designs and master plans by Daniel Burnham was done in portions of Manila and Baguio. 623-624 Part of the Burnham Plan was the construction of government buildings reminiscent of Greek or neoclassical architecture. 621-618 Buildings from the Spanish and American periods can be seen in Iloilo, especially in Cale Real. 625. Music and dance. Main articles. Music of the Philippines and dance in the Philippines. Female dancers in colorful dressnikling, a dance depicting the swift leg movements of a tickling bird eluding a farmer's traps. 6-6. There are 2 types of Philippine folk dance, stemming from traditional indigenous influences and Spanish influence. 227-173. Although native dances had become less popular, 627-77 folk dancing began to revive during the 1920s. 627-82. The carriosa, a Hispanic Filipino dance, is unofficially considered the country's national dance. 628. Popular indigenous dances include the tinikling and sinkle, which include the rhythmic clapping of bamboo poles. 629-630. Present-day dances vary from delicate ballet 631 to street-oriented breakdancing. 632-633. Rondalia music, with traditional mandolin-type instruments, was popular during the Spanish era. 164. 327-634. Spanish-influenced musicians are primarily bandurria-based bands with 14-string guitars. 635-634. Condimen developed during the 1920s, and 1930s. 636. The American colonial period exposed many Filipinos to U.S. culture and popular music. 636. Rock music was introduced to Filipinos during the 1960s and developed into Filipino rock or Pinoy rock, a term encompassing pop rock, alternative rock, heavy metal, punk, new wave, ska, and reggae. Martial law in the 1970s produced Filipino folk rock bands and artists who were at the forefront of political demonstrations. 637-3841. The decade also saw the birth of the Manila Sound and original Filipino music op. 638-61. 171 Filipino hip-hop, which originated in 1979, entered the mainstream in 1990. 639-637. 3841 karaoke is also popular. From 2010 to 2020, Pinoy pop P-pop was influenced by K-pop and J-pop. 641 locally produced theatrical drama became established during the late 1870s. Spanish influence around that time introduced zarzuela plays with music 642 and comedias with dance. The plays became popular throughout the country. 627, 6970, and were written in a number of local languages. 642. American influence introduced vaudeville and ballet. 627, 6970 realistic theater became dominant during the 20th century, with plays focusing on contemporary political and social issues. 642. Literature Riemann article. Philippine literature epitaph of Jose Rizal's writings inspired the Philippine Revolution. Philippine literature consists of works usually written in Filipino, Spanish, or English. Some of the earliest well-known works were created from the 17th to the 19th centuries. 643. They include Ibong Adarna, an epic about an eponymous magical bird. 644. And Florante at Laura, by Tagalog author Francisco Balagtas. 645-646 Jose Rizal wrote the Tianjer and El Filibusterismo. 647, both of which depict the injustices of Spanish colonial rule. 648 folk literature was relatively unaffected by colonial influence until the 19th century due to Spanish indifference. Most printed literary works during Spanish colonial rule were religious in nature, although Filipino elites who later learned Spanish wrote nationalistic literature. 227, 5962. The American arrival began Filipino literary use of English to 27, 65-66, and influenced the development of the Philippine comics industry that flourished from the 1920s through the 1970s. 649-650. In the late 1960s, during the presidency of Ferdinand Marcos, Philippine literature was influenced by political activism. Many poets began using Tagalog, in keeping with the country's oral traditions. 227, 6971 Philippine mythology has been handed down primarily through oral tradition. 651 popular figures are Maria Makiling, 652 Lam Ang, 653, and the Sarimanok. 227, 61-654. The country has a number of folk epics. 655 Wealthy families could preserve transcriptions of the epics as family heirlooms, particularly in Mindanao. The Maranao language Daringan is an example. 656 Media main articles. Mass media in the Philippines and cinema of the Filipinesta Network logo. A multicolored triangle. People's Television Network logo. Philippine media primarily uses Filipino and English, although broadcasting has shifted to Filipino. 518 television shows, commercials, and films are regulated by the Movie and Television Review and Classification Board. 657-658 Most Filipinos obtain news and information from television, the internet. 659 and social media. 660. The country's flagship state-owned broadcast television network is the People's Television Network (PTV). 661 ABS-CBN and GMA, both free-to-air, were the dominant TV networks. 662. Before the May 2020 Philippine government denial of ABS-CBN's franchise renewal, it was the country's largest network. 663 Philippine television dramas, known as teleseries and mainly produced by ABS-CBN and GMA, are also seen in several other countries. 464665 Local filmmaking began in 1919 with the release of the first Filipino-produced feature film, Dalagang Bukid, A Girl from the Country, directed by Jose Nepomuceno, 121122. 8 production companies remained small during the silent film era, but sound films and larger productions emerged in the post-war. 1940s to the early 1960s are considered a high point for Philippine cinema. The 1962 to 1971 decade saw a decline in quality films, although the commercial film industry expanded until the 1980s. 1-to-1 critically acclaimed Philippine films include Himala Miracle and Oro, Plata, Mata Gold, Silver, Death, both released in 1982, 666667. Since the turn of the 21st century, the country's film industry has struggled to compete with larger budget foreign films. 668, particularly Hollywood films. 669670. Art films have thrived, however, and several indie films have been successful domestically and abroad. 67167-673, the Philippines has a large number of radio stations and newspapers. 662 English broadsheets are popular among executives, professionals, and students. 1-to-5. 233-to-5. Less expensive Tagalog tabloids, which grew during the 1990s, are popular particularly in Manila. 674 However, overall newspaper readership is declining in favor of online news. 660675, the top 3 newspapers, by nationwide readership and credibility. 125-to-33 are the Philippine Daily Inquirer, Manila Bulletin, and the Philippine Star. 676677. Although freedom of the press is protected by the Constitution, 678, the country was listed as the 7th most dangerous country for journalists in 2022 by the Committee to Protect Journalists due to 13 unsolved murders of journalists. 679, the Philippine population are the world's top internet users. 680. In early 2021, 67% of Filipinos 91 million had internet access. The overwhelming majority used smartphones. 681. Quizaneman article, Filipino Quizanekanki soup, in a white bowl of fish sinigang from its Malayo-Polynesian origins. Traditional Philippine cuisine has evolved since the 16th century. It was primarily influenced by Hispanic, Chinese, and American cuisines, which were adapted to the Filipino palate. 68-683. Filipinos tend to prefer robust flavors. 684, centered on sweet, salty, and sour combinations. 685. 88 regional variations exist throughout the country. Rice is the general staple starch. 686, but cassava is more common in parts of Mindanao. 687-688. Adobo is the unofficial national dish. 689 other popular dishes include lek-en, kare-kare, sinigang, 690 pancit, lumpia, and arroz caldo. 69169-693 Traditional desserts are kakanin rice cakes, which include puto, suman, and bibingka. 695 Ingredients such as calamansi, 696 yub, 697, and pili are used in Filipino desserts. 698-699. The generous use of condiments such as patis, bagoong, and toyo impart a distinctive Philippine flavor. 691685. 73. Like other East or Southeast Asian countries, most Filipinos do not eat with chopsticks, they use spoons and forks. 700. Traditional eating with the fingers. 701, known as kamayan, had been used in less urbanized areas. 702, 266-68. 277 but has been popularized with the introduction of Filipino food to foreigners and city residents. 703-704 Sports and recreation. Main articles, sports in the Philippines and traditional games in the Filipinestem. Photo, with each blue uniformed member wearing a gold medal. The Philippines men's national basketball team celebrating their 2015 Southeast Asian Games Championship. School, played at the amateur and professional levels, is considered the country's most popular sport. 705. Other popular sports include boxing and billiards, boosted by the achievements of Manny Pacquiao and Efren Reyes. 591. 142707. The national martial art is arnis. 708. Sabong cockfighting is popular entertainment, especially among Filipino men, and was documented by the Magellan Expedition. 709. Video gaming and esports are emerging pastimes. 710-711. With the popularity of indigenous games such as Patintero, Tumbang Presa, Zong Tinik, and Pico declining among young people. 712-711. The men's national football team has participated in one Asian Cup. 713. The women's national football team qualified for the 2023 FIFA Women's World Cup, their first World Cup, in January 2022. 714. The Philippines has participated in every Summer Olympic Games since 1994, except when they supported the American-led boycott of the 1980 Summer Olympics. 715-716. It was the first tropical nation to compete at the Winter Olympic Games, debuting in 1972. 717-718. In 2021, the Philippines received its first ever Olympic gold medal with weightlifter Hidilyn Diaz's victory